Hey guys, Jake Danner here, and today I'm presenting you with my DraftKings and FanDuel NFL picks for Week 2. Now before we get started, I wanted to let you guys know that these picks are primarily for GPPs and not your typical cash game and 50-50s. And you can feel free to use those for your 50-50 games and whatnot, but like I said, these picks are primarily for GPPs. With that being said, let's move on to the quarterback. One of my favorite plays this week has to be Jameis Winston going up against the Chicago Bears. He has a DraftKings price of $6,300 and a FanDuel price of $7,800. The very first thing that I like about this matchup is the fact that the Buccaneers had a long time to prepare for this upcoming matchup. They didn't play in Week 1, and they got to see the Falcons go up against the Bears a week prior. More so than that, I think that the limited rushing attack of the Buccaneers will bode well for Jameis Winston this week. With the suspension to Doug Martin, I think that Winston will have to pass the ball a lot, and hopefully that should translate into some good fantasy stats. This should be true because Chicago allowed the third most yards through the air in Week 1. Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman struggled to get the ground game going, but Matt Ryan was able to deliver through the air, and I think that Winston can do the same with Mike Evans and company this week. Moving on to the running back, my favorite play this week has to be Ezekiel Elliott. I know that Le'Veon Bell and others may be a little bit more pricey and higher, but I do like Elliott this week going up against the Denver defense. He has a DraftKings price of $7,800 and a FanDuel price of $8,700. In 2016, Denver ranked 28th against rushing yards allowed per game, and I believe that with the help of the offensive line of the Cowboys, that Elliott should be able to get the ground game going. I know that last week Melvin Gordon didn't have a phenomenal outing, but if you take in comparison the line of the Chargers and then the line of the Cowboys, you have a world of a difference. So I think that with that difference there, and the difference in running back, Elliott will be able to have a solid outing, especially if they have the lead. And lastly, I think that the strong secondary of the Denver defense will help promote the run game. So I don't think that Dez and Cole Beasley and Terrence Williams will be able to get it going through the air against the stout secondary of Bradley Roby, Aqib Talib, and Chris Harris Jr. So with that being said, I think that the Cowboys will rely more on the run, and this should do very well for fantasy owners of Ezekiel Elliott this week. Now on to my second running back this week. I have Melvin Gordon going up against the Miami Dolphins. He has a DraftKings price of $7,000 and a FanDuel price of $7,600. The biggest reason I like Melvin Gordon this week is the high volume that he brings to the table. He's out there for pretty much all three downs at any given moment in the game. He's getting more involved in the passing game. As you can see last week, he had a reception touchdown. And along with this, Miami ranked 31st against the run last season as far as yards allowed per game goes. So this should bode well for Melvin Gordon and the rushing attack of the LA Chargers this week. Now on to wide receiver number 1, and this has to be probably my favorite play of the week is Julio Jones going up against the Green Bay Packers. And we all know what Julio Jones can do. I don't need to say too much about this guy. He has a DraftKings price of $9,200, a FanDuel price of $8,800, so yes, he is pricey, but I do believe that he is worth the price in this circumstance. Green Bay ranked dead last against the pass in 2016, which tells you all you need to know about the best receiver in the league going up against this secondary. Also, Julio Jones has a huge rebound potential. Something that I just found out about: when Julio Jones is held under 70 yards, he rebounds the following week with at least 110 yards and a touchdown 5 out of 6 times after being held under 70 yards. So basically, anytime that Julio Jones is held up the week prior, he kind of almost gets angry and plays better and comes back with a stronger showing, and this should most certainly carry on in the trend because Green Bay's pass defense is horrendous. After Julio Jones, one of my favorite plays this week at wide receiver is Keenan Allen up against the Miami Dolphins. He has a DraftKings price of $5,800 and a FanDuel price of $7,100. Last week, Keenan Allen had 10 targets against the strong Broncos secondary that I've already mentioned before in this video. Last week, Keenan Allen was targeted 10 times against the Broncos defense, who was number 1 against the pass. Obviously, this week he gets a better matchup against the Dolphins, and one that I like a lot. I think that there's been more time for Keenan Allen and Phillip Rivers to gel. Keenan Allen's been out for a few years now with injuries, not playing full seasons, and I think that the more time that Phillip Rivers and Keenan Allen get to kind of sync, I believe that it will do well for both parties, and I think that Keenan Allen gets an uptick in targets, an uptick in catches, and hopefully a touchdown this week as he plays against a weaker Miami Dolphins secondary. Moving on to wide receiver 3, we have Chris Hogan of the New England Patriots going up against the New Orleans Saints. He has a DraftKings price of $5,600 and a FanDuel price of $6,200. Now this has to be one of my favorite receivers when you look at lower pricing. I know you have Adam Thielen and other guys around there, but Chris Hogan I really like a lot this week, and I think you guys will agree with me once you see these points. With the injuries to Danny Amendola and Julian Edelman, Chris Hogan was forced into a bigger role, and it really didn't show last week. He only had 1 catch, but with the injury to Danny Amendola, Chris Hogan has been playing more time in the slot where Danny Amendola was playing, and I think that this is huge for Hogan this week, as we all saw what Sam Bradford did to the Saints last week. So imagine what Tom Brady's going to do working out of the slot with Hogan. I think that his upside is enormous, especially against this poor Saints secondary. My final skill position play at tight end will be Charles Clay, with a DraftKings price of $3,000 and a FanDuel price of $5,200. Now last week was a solid week for Charles Clay. He led his team in targets, had 1 touchdown catch, and that's really huge when you're looking at tight ends. To lead your team in targets is something that shouldn't be looked past in the DFS world. I think that this week should be no different for Charles Clay, as the Bills have a dinged up Jordan Matthews. Zay Jones is only a rookie, and Tyrod Taylor has been playing with Clay for quite a while now, so I think that Clay could very well be the go-to target again this week going up against Carolina. And like I said, there's a lack of talent at the receiver position, so yet again Charles Clay should be in line for the same amount of targets, hopefully more, and hopefully some more red zone targets. And also, one of the things I like about Charles Clay this week is the fact that the Bills will be playing, will likely be playing from behind against Carolina. I think that Carolina is a better team, but their secondary isn't that good, so playing from behind actually is a very good thing for Charles Clay, as I believe that there will be more passing attempts from Tyrod Taylor than we're used to seeing. Finally, my defensive pick for the week is the Baltimore Ravens going up against the Cleveland Browns. They have a DraftKings price of $3,700 and a FanDuel price of $4,700. Last week, the Ravens shut out the Bengals 20-0, forcing Andy Dalton to throw 4 interceptions and having the worst quarterback rating that he's had in his entire career. And I think that this trend should carry on the next week, moving into the matchup with the Browns, as the Browns have a rookie quarterback, so he's going to be prone to making mistakes. He's going to see some reads that he's never seen. He's going to see some defenses that he's never seen. And with a stout defense like the Ravens, I think that even more turnovers will be forced against a very weak Browns offense. I do think that the Browns are on the rise, but I do not think that this is their week. Finally, I have some additional plays for you guys. Obviously, there's some higher tier players that I like. I could easily say Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or Matt Ryan for quarterback, but those are all guys that everyone knows they're going to consistently put out solid numbers week in and week out. And for GPPs, we're looking for some plays that aren't always going to produce week in and week out. You want to look at different players like Phillip Rivers, somebody that isn't going to be largely owned. I really like his matchup against the Dolphins, and I think that I will be playing him in some of my lineups this week. For the running back position, someone that I also like is Marshawn Lynch against the Jets. The Jets surrendered 190 yards last week to the Buffalo Bills, and I think that Marshawn Lynch will be able to get his first touchdown and first 100-yard game with the Oakland Raiders. At the receiver position, someone who I will be playing a lot in many of my GPPs and cash games is Larry Fitzgerald against the Colts. Now, we all saw that the Colts defense is very poor. Their secondary is poor. Vontae Davis is banged up, and I think that Larry Fitzgerald is in line for another week with double-digit targets and double-digit receptions. Hopefully the Cardinals don't get too much of a lead early on, because that will limit the upside of Fitzgerald if they get too far ahead of the Colts, as they won't need to rely on the passing game all too much. However, I do like Fitzgerald this week against the Colts and their bad secondary. Now on to tight end. My other play this week will be Delanie Walker against the Jaguars. I watched Delanie Walker last year against the Jaguars, and he produced some very solid numbers, produced some solid numbers last week as well, going up against the Raiders. And finally, my other defensive play this week will be the Cardinals against the Colts. One of the reasons I won't be using the Cardinals all too much this week is the fact that I think they're going to be very, very highly owned. I think that the Cardinals are a great cash game play, but I'm not too sure how they're going to do without a rushing attack. So with that being said, I'm not sure how much the Colts will have the ball and thus scoring opportunity. So I guess we'll see how the Cardinals do this week against the Colts. However, with Jacoby Brissett starting, I don't think that the Colts are going to put up too much offensive production and not too many touchdowns either. So that limits the potential of loss in the Cardinals' defense this week in DFS, and I think that they are a great play. And with that, that is the end of my DraftKings and FanDuel picks for NFL Week 2. If you have any questions about my picks or any comments, please leave that below. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.